What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Hawks Storm Room podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, share the podcast, tell a friend, whatever it may be. Um, Tough loss for Hawks tonight, 114-104. Didn't feel like it was that close for the majority of the game, and honestly, a pretty improbable win for the Detroit Pistons, all things considered. Um, Not to say that to discredit them, but just to take a little shot at before I bring my guest on. Uh, but shout out Kofie, man. I really appreciate you taking the time, bro. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right, man. I have never been more excited to be a fan of a mid team. I've never been
I
so
don't even know if
excited
I
to
can
be
call y'all
mid.
mid. I
I'm
mean,
not like in the middle of the pack. Like I don't know.
uh,
It's been like, hey, it's like, yeah, not championship aspirations, but hey, we're not bad. It's like the play in or playoffs. Either outcome this season is just like absolute godsend compared to last year. So yeah, I'm very excited and interesting win today. Honestly, I'm very surprised that this game was our games are not usually smooth sailing.
mm,
That's something that, in terms of the fact where it's like, yeah, we saw we had like a what 18, 19 point lead at the half. And I was like, okay, well, can't wait till this becomes a single digit game in 5 minutes. It's like one of those
yeah.
things, and I'm very surprised by that. But very interesting.
It's funny because last year I felt like the Pistons were the most entertaining team in basketball. And some of that was during the losing streak to just see, are they really going to do it? But also just the amount of situations, just it was incredible the different ways they found to lose a game, the way they found to win games. And so it was like, I actually really enjoyed watching the Pistons last year. And this is a completely different team though. But I definitely really enjoyed watching them. I'm really enjoying what I'm seeing from Cade, and we'll talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, it's completely different energy too. It just like
Mhm,
the energy is different. Like even when you lose games this year, it feels like they're learning from it. What
mhm,
is last year? I think last year bad habits were created and then further perpetuated by the bad play and being like, there's nothing really good here to look at, and there's nothing really good to learn
mhm.
from this. So I think that this year, like the first couple of games this season, we had that stretch where it was a lot of one possession games and some were wins, some were losses. But I think that's we're still learning experiences being like, hey, we need to lock in the fourth quarter. Like we were the worst fourth quarter team for a little bit. Um, but then I feel like this turnaround it's been great, honestly.
Yeah, and for people who may have not, for Hawks fans who may not be familiar, when we're saying that this is a different Pistons team, like there's no shame in losing to this Pistons team. When I told my roommate that we were getting blasted, he said, "By who?" I said, "The Pistons." He said, "The Pistons." I was like, "Look, you got to respect. You got to show them a little bit more respect this year. Like they're not moving like how they have in years past. Really good game, really great game from Cade Cunningham. And to your point, the Pistons are tied for the second most clutch wins in the NBA this season. They have a 58 win percentage in those situations. Last year, I don't even know if they got to 15 wins in the clutch. They had eight. They went 8 of 27 in the clutch. They had the worst clutch winning percentage in the entire NBA. So if that helps to paint that picture, this is a completely different team. And I said at the top of the show that it was a bit improbable for the Pistons. And the reason why I say that is that the Hawks took 19 more shots. They outscored them in points off turnovers. They outscored them in second chance points, and they turned the ball over 7 less times. They lost by 10. I did a quick little search on StatHead, and teams that were able to take at least 10 more field goal attempts than their opponents, five more offensive rebounds, and five more free throws were 18-5 before tonight. So that's almost an 80% win percentage. But the Hawks also shot 15% from three, and teams are 2-34 when they shoot less than 20% this season. So a nice little combination of scenarios for this team. And I just want to kick it off by saying that, like, from a Hawks fan perspective, I didn't really feel like anyone played a great game tonight. Um, I would probably have to highlight Dyson Daniels, though, 20 points, 10 rebounds. I loved how aggressive he was. Like, he was able to get to his spots, 21 shots. He went 0-5 from three, but everything I saw from him getting to the lane, crashing the offensive glass, I was really encouraged to see that. And I love when he's aggressive because when he's aggressive, the offense looks a lot better. So what did you think about Dyson? And then which Piston would you have to highlight from tonight's game?
I was very interested in this Dyson Cade matchup today because whenever there's a player where I'm like, oh, that guy's definitely, that guy's definitely going to be on Cade for a lot of the match. You're like, oh boy. And especially with the Jaden Ivey injury that happened a couple weeks ago, it's like Cade's our primary ball handler. Cade is our
Yep.
like center, where it's one of those things where if Cade doesn't get it going, what's left, right? I don't want Simone Fontecchio dribbling the ball. You know what like, you know what I'm
Right,
saying?
right.
But like
Mhm.
being able to, and the Hawks are one of my favorite like teams to keep up with because I'm a big Trae Young fan, and seeing how Dyson Daniels has been able to be such a great disruptor on that end of the floor is such a cool thing to watch because that's what like DeJounte Murray was supposed to be, but then Dyson Daniels
100%.
actually is that. Um, but Cade is getting way more comfortable, like, he's so comfortable in the fact that, even though he has all those turnovers, he still looks like he's not really that rattled at times when he can get to a certain spots. I think the player that I'm gonna highlight today, however, is definitely Ausar Thompson. I think this is Ausar Thompson, one of Ausar Thompson's best performances of the season and of his short career so far.
Mm.
I think that, um him definitely having that energy being put on Trae Young for most of the game really set the tone. And I mean, there's another Piston that we'll probably talk about later but for now, Ausar Thompson, just seeing how much of a difference it is to have him back on the court over these
Mhm.
over the course of him being back is like so good to see because you see his brother doing well and you're like, "Oh, we got one too, bro. This guy is out of this world." And I think and I gotta think my theory is that I think Cade being better, I think there I don't watch the practices, but I gotta think that Cade gets guarded by Asar in practice all the time. When you go through that in practice, I feel like no matter like even a defensive mind, like a defensive caliber like Dyson Daniels, it's like I think when you're able to see that in practice day in and day out, just someone on that level, I think that probably works wonders as well. Um, but yeah, I was very impressed with like Dyson being able to try it out. Like whatever this Hawks performances was, you are correct. This was just like I feels like just a statistical outlier on so many levels as well. So to see him try to hold it down was very admirable.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that, especially like I love Asar, I love Amin. I was really high on them pre-draft. I think I saw like I used to go to Georgia Tech. I graduated, but I remember we were in the dining hall and the OTE team came in, and I saw how big those dudes were, and then I thought about how skilled they were, and I'm like, yeah, like they're going to be legit. I mean, obviously they weren't in a great situation, but it's hard to get a 1% athlete in the NBA. Like, and I think they're both top five athletes. Asar finished with 4 stocks. He was everywhere defensively. We'll definitely take a look at some of those. Um, I wanted to say that, at least from my perspective, from the Pistons side, Malik Beasley, man, like what happened? I don't know, like 19 points in 23 minutes. I think he's top 3 in 3 pointers made, and he's always been a great shooter. Um, I don't know why I'm blinking. Was he on the? Why am I forgetting what team he was on last year? Was it the Wolves?
I thought it was the Bucks.
Oh, you're right. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was the
is it the
Bucks.
Bucks? Uh,
Yeah,
I I think that like dollar. I know we don't usually we go dollar for dollar. That's one of the best contracts in the NBA, in my
yeah.
opinion.
Per minute, I mean, he's getting
Dollar for
more.
dollar.
Yeah. And the fact that he's taking 9 threes per game and shooting this well, I think him alongside Fontecchio, Tim Hardaway, Tobias Harris, they really opened up the floor for Detroit. And I think what's also interesting is none of these guys are like super small or super exploitable defensively. So this is a big team, a very physical team, very athletic team. And the Hawks definitely felt that tonight. Um, so what was a Hawk that would stand out to you besides Dyson Daniels?
The standouts part to me is that I haven't been watching as many Hawks games in the like recent coming things. So seeing Clint Capella like be able to score like this in his like new role. And I'm like, yeah, I could see that being his new role. He like plays the second team. He still does what he does, but not at the level that he did like a couple of years ago. It's like it's Okonwu time, and I've been big on that for a while. But like seeing that flip finally happen, I don't know, like you've been watching more Hawks games than I have for sure. But I've been for a while. I was like, I think it was time to make a switch, right?
Yeah. And
So
it's interesting because a lot of the aspects that make Clint the guy who they wanted to start was just like he's just a better big man, better on the glass, better setting screens, better above the rim, better vertical spacer. But as he's gotten older, he's lost a bit of a step. The finishing has been
mhm.
awful for years. And I think that Onyeka's kind of like proven that he can step up to that big man task. No, he didn't exactly play as big as he has in the past couple of games against Detroit. And I was curious to see how he'd hold up against Durant because I saw what Jalen Durant did out for Şengün on Monday. And so I wanted to monitor how he would play against him. I think the Hawks in general are just kind of overwhelmed by the size. Like, I mean, Cade, I know Cade's listed at 6'6". I feel like he looks bigger, and I constantly hear people refer to him as 6'8".
Yeah.
And whether he's 6'6" or 6'8", 6'7", whatever it may be, like that's basically Onyeka's height. So in the previous game we played against y'all in Detroit, he blocked Onyeka on a potential game winner. He also blocked him tonight on the fast break. And so I think that's a good example of just like the size disparity across these teams. And it can be tough. And that's why like on some matchups, Capella's a better sort of fit against whatever team's trying to do. Like I think he was pretty good tonight. 6 of 8 from the field, 16 points, 10 rebounds. He can fool you a little bit with rebounds. It's kind of like that Andre Drummond-esque where I think last game against New York, he finished with 3 defensive rebounds and like 7 or 8 offensive rebounds. You look at that and you be like, oh, no, he's feasted. No, he missed 3 tips, and the Hawks did not score in that possession. So that's kind of like the thing. But I do want to start by looking at the film with just what Cade Cunningham was able to do.
Yeah.
I really don't have a comparison for him in terms of the pace, but I don't know if it's the way he just doesn't react to stuff or like his actual demeanor, but he reminds me a lot like how Cam Ward plays football, where he's just like
Ooh, that's good.
he's not phased. He's not phased by anything. And to see someone get guarded by Dyson Daniels and just do whatever he wants, that was a shock to me. Like I was like, yo, this is the first dude I've seen do this.
That's like the highest.
So,
That's like such high praise, honestly, in terms of just like seeing he's the first person that's unfazed by unfazed by Dyson Daniels. Honestly, I feel like that is such like knowing how much of a disruptor Dyson Daniels is. I feel like that's such like that's a huge compliment, honestly.
yeah, I mean, and I thought it's pretty interesting about like Cade as a prospect because I remember some of the knocks that people had were like, oh, he doesn't play with burst or he doesn't necessarily have like elite, speed. But I think that when you're able to just play at your speed and like your control, like he just has full control over everything. Like it never really felt like the Hawks were able to make him change what he wanted to do. And I do think some of that is like, okay, you're bringing Trae Young to double. It's Cade knows he can kind of wait that out until he recovers. But the way he's able to bump off, fade, like tight contest, like this is what I saw Jalen Brunson doing.
Such a
Yeah, that's
tough
a
shot
tough
too.
shot.
Yeah, and I feel like I feel like a lot of this comes from just like last year. Like I think that Cade has definitely had one of the toughest shot diets in his like in the first 4 years of like any NBA career in terms of what he's had to do and create for himself. And even though he has like the spacing threats and all that, he still has these tough shots that he's been working on by necessity for the last couple of seasons. So to see him kind of improve on that front as well as the pull-up threes off of the high pick and rolls as well, which is something that I think he's doing more than last year. Being able to like, I'm comfortable with a Cade mid-range shot. I know that people talk about like the mid-range game. I'm like, Cade can shoot whatever mid-range shot he wants because I know that it's the shot he wants to take. It's the shot he feels. If that's the shot he feels most comfortable taking at the time, I want him to do that. So seeing him be able to just like get to a spot and like even with the lack of like burst that people talk about, he's still being able to create his own like space with his strength and like change of pace, honestly, which is nice.
No, he's super strong. And to your point about 3-point shooting, he's never really been above league average 3-point shooter. Last year he was pretty close, 35%, was taking about 7.8 per 100. This year he's at 37, 75th percentile, taking nearly 9 per 100 possessions. And I thought that it was really when I saw this, it was the next play where he had Dyson went under. Yeah, here it is right here. When he starts hitting these shots, it's just like, man, what do you do with this guy? So Dyson goes under on the screen, which based on the scouting report, like you want Cade to take as many threes, based on what he's done in previous seasons. But it's just so seamless. Like he's not thinking about anything. It's just like he immediately sees him goes under, and he's already going into the shot here. And so I'm curious, like, what have you seen like in terms of growth as a shooter, like confidence wise, mechanics wise? Like, what do you think is the biggest contribution to him like, being able to knock these down?
Last year, last year he might hesitate a little bit more than he might still take the shot, but this year it feels a lot more fluid and it feels a lot more like uh it feels a lot more like he's not taking the shot in 2015, he's taking the shot in 2000, 24,
Mm,
25, where it's
mm,
like, my theory is that I think this is the part where JB Bickerstaff got here, looked at Cade, looked at Jaden Ivey, was like, hey man, y'all the two best players. Let it fly, dog. And I think that
yeah,
a lot of that also, I think there's also a lot of influence that comes from Malik Beasley because Malik Beasley will let that thing fly no matter what. So I think that seeing that as well, Cade's also like, yeah, I am open right now. This is an open shot, and this is a shot that I think a lot of people on the team and in the organization will live with. And I think that these shots are so important because it also opens up like the spacing for the cuts and whatever. And like I think it
yeah,
starts with this. So I am so glad that now I'm not like I don't want him, when Anthony Edwards started like taking like 12 threes a game or something like that, something hot, like super high. I didn't want to see that much of like a night and day jump. But
right.
I think the gradual jump that it's been going at, I'm like, yeah, totally fine with this. It doesn't feel out of character. Um,
Mhm.
and it's what the defense is giving you, so might as well.
And I think I wanted to make this point too because I have this theory about stars where at some point you have to be forced to operate out of your comfort zone, whether it's in like a not perfect offensive situation or being tasked to create for others. And for Cade, even since his rookie season, so this is from NBARPM.com, which is like quickly become one of my favorite stat sites. When you look at his creation loads, like since he came to the NBA, he's been in the top 10 percentile and like shot attempts out of creation. So isolation, handler, post up. And he's
Mhm.
always been relatively above league average on the toughest shots in the NBA. And so the lead that's coming from him actually isn't like, I mean, he is scaling this up a bit. Like you see, he's now in the 97th percentile. But look how much better he's doing relative to the league in terms of shooting. And that's spot up, that's hand off, that's off screens. And I think
Yeah.
it's that natural translation where, okay, I've become adept at taking these tough shots. How can I get easier shots? How can I play off my teammates who are creating more spacing for myself? So I've been really impressed with what he's doing in general, and then also just what he did to the Hawks tonight. And I just hit the wrong button. Try to go back to the film. Um, and I think like he's one of those guys like, and I've had to have these discussions with people online a lot where it's like you have to be like to be the type of playmaker that a Trae is, a Cade is, a Jokic, a Luka. Like you have to have volume scoring ability, and the more efficient that he gets as a scorer, the better his playmaking is going to be. And so again, like it's hard. I can really give you a list of maybe five guys who can move Dyson out the way like this,
Yeah.
and he just had Dyson off balance all night, whether it was pump fakes, strength, whatever it may be. I was just super, super impressed.
And the bag of tricks keeps getting deeper, I think, the more I see Cade play, where, he will work in these hook shots. I mean, he'll try the lefty hook shot. I think he's still like
Mhm,
working on getting that down pat. I think that the Cade, even though it's the trickery, it's the dribble moves, it's the different combos he has, it's the different types of finishes that he experiments with in terms of like how to, he's not gonna like rise over defenders like like a John Morant type, but he is gonna be able
mhm.
to use his craftiness, his skill to be able to play off a defender no matter what they throw at you. And he's just so smart. He's just so smart. Now I know a lot of people are gonna be like, but the turnovers though, and I'm like, I'm not concerned about that at any
Mhm.
point, honestly. I think the fact that he's just so like he just has these flashes of genius, I think, when he just, like, gets in the rim where, like, it's not gonna look like, um, an NBA top 10 play of the season, but it's one of those things where it's like he's doing all these little things where it's like he's learned, and it's like this is just what he's good at, you know?
And
Not many
just
people back.
having the frame to do this is crazy.
Yeah,
I've watched Dyson stand up LeBron. I've watched him like especially when he was on Pelicans. Like a lot of the film, he can check guys like this. But sometimes guys have a great night, right? So I think from Hawks
yeah.
fans' perspective, it's like, man, we traded for this guy to lock guys down. Like he's getting fried. It's gonna happen, man. Like the NBA is too good. Like you're gonna run into these guys who are going to have great shooting nights, or are just gonna be a tougher matchup for any defender in the NBA. And some Hawks fans I saw like, okay, let's put DeAndre Hunter on him, and they ended up making that switch, which I did like just because Dre has a stronger frame, more like, like he can sort of withstand what you're seeing right here a
Yeah.
bit more. And this is also where I say like I feel like Cade is bigger than what he's listed at because Dyson's listed at 6'8", and also they're listed at 20 pounds. There's a 20-pound difference. So being able to go to that bully ball is such an asset because it just gives him a different way to score. And then of course like he can mix in this was nasty. Like I don't see Dyson jump on fakes like this. I just don't. But he was able to get to his spots, and like even this, like if you see Dyson lose his balance, I was like, yo, what's going on? Like, is this like what? I didn't understand it for a second, but I mean, this is what the evolution, I guess, of what Cade has become because
It's
I
the
think it was always there.
it's the bag of tricks and the footwork, definitely for sure. And
Mm.
I feel like just seeing that being like, oh yeah, Cade definitely he knows what he's doing, but he also has his counters for things as well. And I think that just leads to so many shots that he's still comfortable with no matter what, where it's like, yeah, this midi, he, take the spin move because he's now maybe it's like the counter reverse, Dyson Daniels able to cut that off. Okay, spin back, right? Um, and I don't think he's like forcing anything right now. It's just letting the game come to him, which is like just beautiful work.
Yeah, and then you get the blood of the playmaking. I don't think the Hawks were very connected defensively. They were elite against Boston. They were at a high level that they were tonight against New York as well. So here, like you probably want Trae to just show a little bit longer, especially like this is a prime opportunity to try and draw a charge, whatever it may be. But you see a little bit more resistance here. But his scoring gravity and then like the velocity on this pass too, like where Jalen's trying to close in on this, he's not able to get there in time. His 2 points. I was also he threw some lobs too that like I knew he had in his bag, but they just looked really easy. Here's skip pass, Tobias Harris. Um,
Yep.
that's a no look. Like this is the type of stuff I see
He
Trae do. So
he he
that's
free
what I'm
he
really excited to
freezes
see.
Trey for a little bit. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so you see Trae is, most NBA teams want to cut off the corner. Um, here, Tobias is a better shooter, but Ausar is also a threat, like diving to the basket. So I understand why Trae does this. And
Yeah.
also, Cade is just not looking at the wing when he lets this go. Like that's a high
No.
level pass. Again, like that's the type
Yeah.
of stuff I see Trae do. So to see a dude with his frame do that is kind of unfair. I want to see. I can't remember exactly when the alley oop he threw was, but that was nasty too. I think
Oh,
here's one of
this.
them. Yeah.
That's the thing about, like, when Duren's in the game, that is more the lob threat, than, like, Isaiah Stewart doesn't have that kind of, like, above the rim, in terms
Mm.
of, like, jump out the gym athleticism in terms of, like, that Duren has. So, Cade and Duren have been definitely able to have that alley-oop connection, but that doesn't mean that when Isaiah Stewart comes in the game that, like, I'm like when Isaiah Stewart comes in the game, I'm not like, "Oh, no." I'm, like, also excited to have him too. Um I think he played great today, honestly, in terms of and he got our WWE belt. He got our Pistons belt that we hand out. Do you know about the belt?
I don't. I was like, what does that mean?
Oh, so the Pistons now we have this WWE belt. It's like I think
Mm.
it's like the game ball, honestly, and the members of the team, it gets passed down from player to player. So Duran had it last game, and at the end of the game, they pass it on to Isaiah Stewart for playing so well. So I guess the team also recognized that Isaiah Stewart played very well today in terms of the fact that Duran had early foul trouble and Isaiah Stewart is able to come in there and just like to protect the
Right.
rim. And
Yep.
if there's one thing he's gonna do, he's gonna take pride in the rim. Even if he gets scored on or whatever, he's gonna try his best. So yeah, but seeing Cade be able to like make these passes is great because at the same time, it's like last year the people in the corner would be Asar and Isaiah Stewart because they would play Stewart, Duran, and um,
Oh, that's nasty. I didn't even think
Ausar.
about that.
They used
Oh
to
my
yeah,
god.
last year, I'm seeing a lot of these plays this year, and
Mhm.
I'm like, "Okay, here's the starting lineup," right? That would be Tobias Harris would be Isaiah Stewart, Asar would be Asar
Mhm.
Still. And even though Isaiah Stewart shot pretty well from, like, catch and shoot threes and whatever, he wasn't enough for people that people are like, "They still live with it all year," right?
Yeah.
And even though Tobias Harris isn't having like a career season or whatever, it's still like the threat of him being out there. I think just the threat of giving up that shot has changed so much and allowed just so much more space for them to operate with compared to last year. Because last year it was what you'd be passing, and I'm like, oh, is that Isaiah Livers? Right? It was just like these players. Pistons played like 31 different
Mhm.
players last year. Man, it was brutal. This is
Yeah.
heavenly basketball compared to last year.
I remember seeing your Isaiah Livers rants, so I definitely remember that. But I also want to point out too, like this is really smart play design from you guys, and the reason why I feel like it's so smart is, obviously Ausar isn't a huge shooting threat, but from the Hawks' perspective, they ideally would want Trae on Tim Hardaway, but because Trae's guarding Ausar, when the pick and roll comes to his side, I mean, there's nothing he can do to pinch this. Like, there's nothing he can do to actually stop this from happening. Now,
Mhm.
let's say that it was ran to DeAndre Hunter's side. Now you have a bigger player who can shrink the floor and sort of break up that lob, which we actually saw Dre do in a later game. So this is smart awareness from Cade. So even though the pick is set that way, or if the pick would have been set this way, he went to the right, that wouldn't have been like the best read. But because he's able to direct during going down that side of the floor, then it
Yeah,
opens up that lob opportunity. And this
yeah,
actually starts off as a spoon pick roll too.
they still get the movement that they want off of this.
And that's
So
without having a great shooter in the corner. You're still able to manufacture that space. So I thought that was
yeah,
pretty smart. Um, I do want to ask you about the turnovers. And look, for me personally, I think I don't freak out about turnovers. I mean, I'm a Trae Young fan, so it's like I value the like if you're going to be a real playmaker, you're going to have turnovers. That's just it's kind of like it's the name of the game. Um, I think from Cade, I do think he has some pretty lazy slash bad turnovers, and I think he had some tonight. 2 games back to back with 10 turnovers, but also two back to back wins. So I think he provides way more value than he's throwing away. But I do want to hear your take on it.
I think that for me, again, like you just said, for me, it's not the amount of turnovers, it's the overall silliness of them. Like that. I have no problem with that one,
Yeah,
right?
this is fun.
Like I'm a huge fan of a turnover if it's a good idea and thought and the game just processed a little bit faster, right? Um, that is just like now that's just Dyson. All right, I can't
Yeah,
do that.
yeah.
You get got,
This is
bro.
crazy. This is
That's that,
crazy
that's
one.
just that's
And
just a
he recovered.
generational talent right there, man. I can't even. That's crazy,
This was an and one too.
bro. Cade has no. Cade looking at the ref, be like, the ref's like, nah. See this kind of stuff where I'm just like, yeah,
It's a little
I
goofy.
wish,
Off the back
you
of his
know,
foot. Yeah.
yeah, it's like a traffic. It's again, it's the silliness of some of these. There's a game earlier this year where there's a really important like whatever, and Kate just like yeets it out of bounds, and I'm like, there was like 18 seconds on the shot clock. It's four. I'm just saying like, okay, but I think he's cut down on that. But at the same time, I feel like if you look at all the players on the court, there's no one else I'd rather have the ball in their hands, even if he's like having these high turnover games, right? I'm
Right.
not like that's Tim Hardaway Jr., that's Malik Beasley, that's Tobias Harris. Um, with the Jaden Ivey injury, really, it cut our actual like ball handlers we can trust on the roster by 33%. So it's one of those things where I'm like, whatever. So it's either this or like Marcus Sasser, okay? And I love Marcus Sasser, but at the same time, we got like he only played what 14 minutes today. It's not like you're gonna beef him up in the roster. It's like that. So this is just the reality of where we are right now. And Jaden Ivey's not coming back. I don't know what we do with the trade deadline if we try to get another secondary, another ball handler or another shot creator as
Mhm.
well. But if it's the Cade show, I'm gonna expect these high turnover games if he's expecting to do everything. Honestly, I'm not gonna be like
I
moved
think
by
that
these.
yeah. I think that point too about like what Cade or Trae or Luka, whatever these high usage players, their dominance of the ball, what that does for the team's floor offensively, because yes, they're throwing the ball away, but they're also generating more assists and they're probably turning it over less than any other option on the floor. Um, so I think that definitely makes sense. And then, again, if we go look back at his numbers, like he's increased his assists every year. And right now he's at the highest on ball percentage of his career. And his bad pass turnovers have scaled up as a result. Like that's kind of just what's going to happen. Like he's at 3.6. If you look at Trae, I think he's somewhat similar, but yeah, like Trae is obviously the best playmaker like productivity wise in the NBA. He's on the ball even more than Cade is, and you can see what his bad pass turnovers look like. Now, again, that doesn't mean that you should just be throwing the ball away, but it does mean that, like, relative to other players, I'm okay with Trae having 4 or 5 as opposed to like someone who isn't providing that playmaking value having a bit more. And I do think also, just from what I saw in the second half, kind of feel like the Pistons took their foot off the gas a little bit.
Oh
The
yeah.
Hawks had an 80. We had an 80 defensive rating. Cade was kind of throwing some meatballs up there. Like this was never been.
I see this. I'm just like, oh man,
But
that.
here's the embarrassing thing too, because first off, also Clint isn't making this read. Like if this is Clint Capella on the floor, this pass is getting there
Yeah.
because he's going to slip right here by Jalen Duren. Huge play by Onyeka, but this is where I get embarrassed because this is my center going up against your point guard, and he gets stuffed.
Hey, Cade is for Cade's athleticism, he's a great shot blocker in terms
He
of
is.
what they give him credit for. He'll sneak up on you, man. Like it's a sneaky, like you know. So like yeah,
As a center, you can't go for that though.
you, you hate
You can't go for that.
you hate to see it, but hate to see it, but that's a great read by see that's an interesting idea. Like you know what I'm saying, where it's like
Mhm.
he sees the like window, it just closes. Like Jalen Johnson just makes a great read at it, you know. So once again, and you know, the Pistons had a stretch in like the last four. It almost got to like it was at 12 for a little bit, and I was like, oh
It
my
was.
goodness,
It's a
yeah,
yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
oh no. You know, and last year, if it goes to 12, you call a timeout, nothing changes, goes down to 8, goes down to 6, you know, goes down to so seeing a Bickerstaff be able to call a timeout and still be able to be like, okay, hey, lock in, y'all, you know, and seeing the Pistons be able to, oh, you know, you know, it's one of those things where again, it's like, hey, mistakes. This is a mistakes happen kind of thing, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't. That's Dyson again. That's just see generational. That's you know like these so a lot of these I'm like that's this is fine. Like I don't
Mm.
these are you're not like throwing this into the third row. You know you're still trying to like make the right read against like generational defense. Like that's what a generational defender looks like. So the number that's why with the number I usually when I see the number I'm like let's take a closer look honestly because I think there's a such thing as a good turnover and a bad turnover. Not like a you know, not like a perfect turnover, but like there's a turnover. I'm like, yeah, good idea. I see it. I see what you try to do. You made the right read. It just didn't happen. But then there's like a what were you doing? Or you like you try to control alt delete mid pass. You know.
Yeah.
So,
And I also feel like I wish the NBA would publish something like this, but the amount of turnovers that actually turn into points is a lot more important to me too. Like, are you throwing these live ball turnovers? Are you able to get back and recover them? And I think if you can make up for them, that's all I'm looking for. Now I want to talk a little bit about the Pistons defense and Ausar Thompson, who man, the amount of activity he gave tonight, I think he gave the Hawks fix. Now, mind you, on this possession, uh, I know you said you haven't had a chance to catch a lot of Hawks basketball. Bogdanovich has been a different dude, man. Like last
what
year,
what
top
happened to
36
my
in the
boy?
NBA. I
What
don't
happened to
even
my
I couldn't
boy?
even give you an answer. He has hold on, let me check these numbers real quick. I'm pretty sure he's 6 of 40 from the floor. Um in the last 3 games. I think Brad tweeted it up. Let me see. Um okay, yeah. 6 of 40 from the field and 4 of 29 from three in the last 5 games combined.
That's brutal
It's
basketball.
been horrific. And here's the thing, like Bogey has never been a positive defensive player. Not at any point in his career. So
Yeah.
he's he's tanking our lineups and it's been bad. And the reason why and the other thing is it's not even just when he misses shots, it's the shots he doesn't take, right? So I'm okay with him driving this here. Then he passes this out. Trae has to shoot this. He
Yeah.
has to
I
shoot this.
agree.
doesn't shoot it. Bogey has to shoot this,
Yeah.
doesn't shoot it. And then now the Hawks are in trouble. They're just playing keep away.
Yeah.
Trae and Bogey have passed the ball back and forth about 3 or 4 times. And yes, a lot of this is a lack of aggression from the Hawks, but I also just want to direct everyone's attention back to Ausar Thompson, number 9 on Trae Young. Just watch how many people he guards here. So gets off of Trae, Bogey drives, cuts off that dig right there, gets back out the Trae, runs him off the line, peels off the Bogey on this drive. It's ridiculous intention that he picks up Trae, boom. He, as much as the Hawks shot themselves in the foot, Ausar Thompson also completely shut down this possession. And they're overthinking because of his defensive ability. So the dude is special, man. Yeah, that's really all it is to.
And it's one of those things where that it doesn't show up in the box score, right? But it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I'm so glad that this man is on our team because the energy absolutely shifts. And I think that the more that he's on the floor, and then the more that Ron Holland gets to be able to get those defensive reps too. Like, I'm very excited for what that means for the future of the Pistons, honestly. But yeah, dude, it blows my mind, especially seeing Ausar and Stewart on the floor compared to like when Stewart compared to Duran, you get more rim protection. So seeing, even if Ausar, I feel like part of that allows Ausar to be a little bit more aggressive as well. And I think that's also a huge enabler, being like, okay, if I get aggressive and I get beat, it's not like it's a free layup. There's still going to be some kind of challenge. I think that does wonders for this team, especially compared to last year. Now we might give up a lot. I feel like we gave up a lot of wide open threes today, and the Hawks just like it was a outlier, nightmarish misfest today. But it's one of those things where I'm glad of like how we covered today, and I think that since they added the WWE belt to the locker room, there's been a little bit more effort in trying to get the belt. That's what I was thinking. I was like, I mean, you could pay these athletes millions of dollars, but if they get awarded like a turnover belt or a belt at the end of the game, that's priceless right there. You know, so that's my theory.
Yeah, I think we missed a lot of shots, but I do say one thing that I thought Detroit did really well tonight was who took these shots, right? So Trae played 40 minutes. He only attempted 13. This season, he averaged 22 shot attempts when he plays 40-plus minutes. In his career, he's played 36 games when he played 40-plus minutes. He's averaging closer to 24 shot attempts. So
how many games do you watch where you think that the other team's coverage is like anyone but Trae? And do you feel like that was today in terms of like the focus?
I think it was somewhat like that today, but I think it's more so like they want to. I felt like from what I saw from you guys, it was collapsing on the paint really, really heavy and trying to push the Hawks out to the perimeter as much as possible, which I see the teams do against the Hawks because we have one. I think we're the second in paint attempt rate, so we typically want to get inside that paint area as much as possible. And then there's just a lack of consistent shooters, especially with bogey struggles. So I think that's what I saw.
And you guys are one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the league, right? Is that still? Yeah. So I think that that was one of those things as well where I think Isaiah Stewart I think he had a big focus on that today in terms of even if he gets beat, like I think the positioning thing was very important. You know, and that's just all the good things that Isaiah Stewart does, where he
engages Clay right here immediately.
I think that this year Isaiah Stewart, I haven't commended him enough for playing such a different role than last year. You know, last year he was playing a lot of minutes at the 4 next to Jalen Duren, which was a very awkward 2000s era Monty Williams type beat. And then this year he's like being able to play the backup 5, which has been good. Now, he hasn't like done as much offensively this year, but he hasn't been asked to do as much offensively this year. Like now we actually have like Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., all these other players that will be willing to take the shots. So I think that that's definitely fine, and I'm not really stressed about that. But I think the overall jump in effort has worked wonders. Just worked wonders. And I'm not saying that they weren't trying hard last year, but last year all it took was like a quick 10-0 run from any team in the league, and this team would check out. That would be it. Where it'd be like, oh, this team has a double-digit lead. All right, it's over. We've lost 23 in a row, you know? it's one of those things where I
Yeah.
think that mentality is kind of shifted over the course of this year, which has been great to see.
And it's so interesting to hear that because that's the same sort of thing I've seen from the Hawks. Even though we do drop games like this where we play really bad offensively. Last year, for example, we talked about the disparity and the improvement from the clutch winning percentage. The Hawks were 22nd in clutch winning percentage. We were 21 and 26. This year, we have the third best record in the clutch.
Whew.
So um, that's a massive jump. We're at 63 winning percentage. Cleveland is the only team above 60%, but OKC's at 64. They've mind you, they've only played 14 clutch games, so like that kind of just speaks to their dominance.
Yeah.
Um, I do want to say one thing about you guys too. You got the right people taking 3-point shots. Jalen Johnson and Dyson Daniels took 11. That's not good for the Hawks. Like I don't like overall like shooting confidence aside, it is not a
Yeah.
good thing when Jalen and Dyson take 11 threes because that means that they weren't able to get the shots, or they weren't able to funnel shots to our best shooters. Um, so our best shooter is DeAndre Hunter. He took 9. He made 0. That's not going to happen probably ever again. But I do think aside from like the end of the quarter shots, you can just see how much pressure and how willing the Pistons were to try and cut off the paint. So here, like Fontecchio is helping here because he's waiting for Stu to recover, and then
Yeah.
the ball gets swung to Jalen Johnson, who you'd rather take a 3, and that ball gets swung to Capella in the paint. I think that was a good defensive process. I love Jalen. His shot just isn't consistent enough at this point. He is coming off a bit of a like missing some time. I think he just doesn't have a great like shot motion for a catch and shoot player. Like I don't know, it doesn't always look great. And it's weird because he has really good touch in like the paint, floaters, whatever it may be. But I think from the 3-point line, he just has a lot of growth to get from there. But again,
I
like
think that they're like he's one of the players in this league that I'm the highest on, no matter like
mhm,
like sky is the limit type player. So he's one of my favorite players to watch, especially watching him play with Trae and how they play off of each other. So it I wouldn't I'm like I can't wait till I revisit this in 2 years and see where this goes because I'm like this man is this dude's special, honestly.
yeah,
And but I think that you are right on it, you are right, and I think that that's just more like when he becomes more comfortable over, like, the course of whatever, I think that he's gonna be a very good learner.
and that's the crazy thing because like and that's the point I try to make about Jalen as much as I can. Are all the other guys on the Hawks like they're still super raw. Like
Yeah.
Dyson is still super raw as an offensive player. He's getting a lot better in the short roll. Jalen's a lot better as a play finisher, but like they still have a lot of ways to grow as a creator. Again, you can see how intentional the Pistons are about trying to cut off the paint. So they have I don't know if Tobias Harris is supposed to be over that much. He probably isn't. But Cade comes over to pinch this, and it's giving up a 3 for Dyson, who again isn't the strongest shooter. Um, so I thought it was good game plan, sort of. Again, like just you guys were just flying around, bro. Like this is
Yeah,
a
you got
nice little pass off here. So you
on
see
the same
Tobias
page
went
too.
to the ball. Yep, completely
Everyone's on the
connected.
same page, yeah.
And
Better than,
I
like
know how it feels to not see this. So I know how this feels to actually see it.
better than last year too. I think that there's more cohesion as well. Because I mean, last year, another thing about how bad we were is that we had like 31 different starting lineups or something. It was something crazy in terms of just like injuries, in terms of people getting called up, sent down, in terms of, um, we waived Kevin Knox just to sign him again 2 weeks. It was some weird, a lot of weird stuff was happening last year, man. I'm gonna
Yeah.
be honest. Um, and I think that being able to have, like, a clear and concise rotation, and then if need be, Marcus Sasser comes in or Paul Reed comes in for that rotation, I think that just having that and be able to have these players, um, just, like, learn and play with each other now that, like, they're just getting stronger as the season goes on. Now, I don't know if they're gonna be making any moves during the deadline. I don't know what they're gonna do, but it's been really good to have, veterans that clearly wanna be here.
Yeah.
Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley has bought into the Detroit culture, Tim Hardaway Jr. as well. Having all 3 of these guys, no matter how they're playing on the court, they do wanna be here.
Mhm.
And I really a lot of players last year, some of the players last year that left were here and left. I don't know if you ever really felt that, like it's like I'm glad that I'm still in the NBA, but it's like, do you really want to be on the Pistons? I feel like that's
Mhm.
kind of a culture and vibe thing that I think that lands on Monty as well. Um, so there's just a whole lot of different stuff this year that I'm excited about. Where it's like I didn't think that, even though when Cade said that they're not a whatever, when he said they're not a 4-win team, when he said that last year, I believed him. I was like, yeah, I feel like I believe you, right? Like
Mhm.
on the box score, yeah, 4 wins, bad. I do not think, because we were having some weird conversations last year. Honestly, we were having some. Is this core four even? Can Cade and Ivy play together? Because the
Oh,
coach
yeah, I
doesn't
remember
want
that.
that. We were in some weird conversations. And the conversations are a little bit different. There are some conversations we still have in terms of um, Jalen Duren's defensive attention. That's been a big one. It's kind of been like a small uptick recently, but that was a big concern for Jalen Duren versus any stretch big. That kind of conversation. So it's like different conversations, but it's like, hey, but we are not that bad. We are not as bad as last year. So again, it's good to be in a different spot.
No, I definitely feel that. Hawks fans are still prone to overanalyzing after every loss. I'm sure that there was a subset of some people saying that this team is, not built to, the right way long term. But I think from what I've seen, I have a lot of more faith in where we're going. Because I see possessions. What I saw from the Pistons tonight in terms of like playing on a string, um, sort of great communication, great synergy among guys is what I see from the Hawks on most nights. Uh, what we saw tonight wasn't great shooting. I think the Pistons kind of outworked them at some points. We'll see how they respond against Toronto. But from a more on a game by game basis, I've seen more consistently convincing results. And I do also want to point out too here, so to that point of like knowing who you want to shoot threes. When Ausar closes out here, like there are a lot of guys in the NBA who would probably just fly Dyson with 3 seconds on the shot clock. But
Yeah.
look at the path he takes. Like he's
Sorry, it's
like, you're
like,
taking this.
yeah, I don't
You're gonna
want
pass this, or I'm gonna take it, or I don't want to trade to shoot it.
I don't want 11 touching the ball as much as that's
Mm.
my favorite player, but when he's on the court with us, I
Yeah.
don't want him anywhere near that basketball. But
And
yeah,
he
I think
veers and he still gets a contest. Like this is the wild part to me. Like he cuts off this passing lane and he still is able to basically get his hand near the ball.
so
Like he's ridiculous.
he's so nuts, man. Like it's crazy. Like I honestly don't know like what his overall ceiling entails, but it's just like he's doing stuff that can't be coached. It's like, yeah, happy to
I'm
have him.
curious, how often do you kind of feel that like the Pistons are just a bigger or stronger team than who you play? Because I felt like the Hawks, even though we won the offensive glass and we were able to get to the rim, like we took 50% of our shots at the rim, which is the 99th percentile out of teams this season. But we shot just 55%. So that's the 15th percentile. I think some of that was the size. I think some of that was just like type of shots that you guys were allowing. But just in general, when do you feel like, how often do you feel like, okay, we're a bigger team?
I honestly don't notice. When
Mm.
I watch, I really don't, because all earlier in this season, Jalen Duren was like a kind of more of like a turnstile at the rim, where it was like, yeah, he has all these muscles and stuff. He's huge, but the thing is like he wasn't like blocking, like being as active around the rim and stuff like that. So I feel like that was one of those things where it's like, okay, like I don't feel like we're out like muscling teams. I feel like, yeah, we could put lineups where we can put out lineups for sure where your smallest defender is gonna have to either pick Cade or pick someone even taller than him, which is something I
Yeah.
like a lot. Um, I think the smallest guard in our roster is Sasser for sure, but I think that we definitely it's definitely Detroit basketball in terms of, like, we're gonna try to, like, bully you in terms of just, like, get to our like, Cade's gonna try to bully you, and then Duren's just, like, absolute monster on the boards, So I think that plus the impressive new effort that I've seen from this Pistons team, I think it's not really a bigger and stronger. It's more like we're gonna put effort, like a lot of our effort into these games, and I feel like that effort's starting to show. So I think it's more of that where it's like
Yeah.
and not like and anybody coming to town, it's not like backing down and being like, oh, you guys are the Rockets. You're the number 2 seed in the West. Oh, you guys on paper are better than us. Like last year, if a team on paper was better than us, they were just gonna you could sim the game and be fine. This season it's different, where it's like, hey, this team might be good, but like, hey, we're not gonna back down from a challenge. So I think that
Mhm.
that's more of the case than it's being like Jalen Duren mouse in the house posting up, you know what I'm saying? Like it's more like yeah, we have more pride in the Pistons logo this time around.
So, I want to follow up question with Jalen Duren because I wrote in my notes like, is there a bigger gap between the aesthetic profile of a player and their actual impact on defense? Because Jalen Duren is a ridiculously built dude, and even I heard the Hawks announcers say, man, look at him, he's built like a linebacker. He's so great on defense. They're talking about the 7'5" wingspan. But I've seen Pistons fans put together like I think I saw a 30-minute montage of his
Or
being able on
yeah.
defense. And so I'm curious, like, what do you think it is with him? Like, why do you think he struggled to make an impact on that end? Do you think he can get to, he has all the tools in the world. Do you think he can get to a tenable? I think he is tenable. But like, do you think he can get to an above average level defensively?
I think you can definitely get to a point where, I feel like I always want to be that kind of optimist where if a player has the tools, I want to be like, okay, I feel like I'm not asking this dude to make miracles, right?
Mhm.
I think if a player has the tools, I think it takes the right amount of, and I think that he's shown like slighter improvement in the last couple of games, and I think that, um, I think that the more in, yes, I think that the more involved he gets on offense, the better he is on defense. It's not like a Randall thing where it's like when Randall's scoring 20, he like wants to play on the other end, It's one of the not one of those things, but
Yeah.
I think Jalen Duren's starting to realize more that the more he runs the floor, the more effort he gets rewarded in terms of like Cade being able to find it for easy shots. I feel like
Yeah.
that also kind of motivates him to try a little more on the defensive end. Now, the drop coverage thing scares me. Whenever he goes up against a stretch big, I think that that's probably my main thing where it's like, I remember Vucevic lit him up earlier this year.
Mhm.
And there are a bunch of like, it was at earlier in the season. It was like if your center can shoot threes, then we're gonna have a rough time. Um, so that's where I kind of find that. Also, for Duran, I think there's a foul concern as well. Sometimes, depending, like there's a foul concern or something. Like earlier today, he got 2 fouls, and sometimes he'll have these games where he'll just be like, you'll see the Pistons play, and you're like, why did Jalen Duran only play 14 minutes? And you're like, okay, So it has kind of that kind of thing as well. So it's like I think it's being more disciplined when contesting and stuff because there's no one saying that he can't just like rise up and swat shots. I think there's a discipline aspect for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that the more and more that he plays, it's like I'm willing to like trust him because he's like what 21 or something. Like I'm like that's okay. Well, I feel like now that he has a coach that I love Bickerstaff. Like I feel like now that he has that, I'm willing to be more like patient about it. So it did show at times because sometimes you would watch him and you'd be like, it's not just that it's not just that it was bad at times. It was like we could just play Isaiah Stewart right now. Like
Mhm.
that was the thing where it'd be like, okay, like it's not like it's not like one of those things where it's like, hey, if Jalen Duren's playing bad defensively, we have to live with it. It's like, hey, Isaiah Stewart is the person that we could play like better on defense at the time if Jalen. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, But I feel like the more contagious this Detroit Pistons mentality is, the better he's going to be for it. I have that kind of hope and faith.
Yeah, and I think a lot of interesting things you said there. And when you look at the numbers, like what we have up on the screen, those are super like nothing jumps out at you. Like I mean, for his career, teams are shooting 4% worse than when he's on the floor, which is good when he gets the shots. But it's not like for his profile, for his size, it's not jumping off the page like you would expect. But
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is just like getting those reps. Like you said, he's really young because he dropped big. You also didn't have the best defensive personnel around him, to be fair, too. So you didn't
Oh,
have
we
the greatest
for sure
culture
did
either.
not. Yeah.
And so I think
No.
your point about, becoming a more competitive team is going to make someone want to buy in defensively. I've seen what Dyson Daniels has done for a team. He's not even a big, but like he has brought a contagious amount of buy-in defensively. And I think as much as that's come with him, it's also come with Quinn Snyder. And Quinn Snyder has come in and really built an idea or an ideal for Hawks basketball. This is how we're going to play. This is how we're going to develop guys to play. Um, and so I find it really interesting when we talk about JB Bickerstaff because Cavs fans hated him. They
Yeah.
treated him like he was the sole reason why they lost in the playoffs and that he was the reason for all their failures. And I think as someone who didn't watch him super intently and I didn't really understand what the Bickerstaff experience was like, when I see them hooping with Kenny Atkinson, I'm like, was it Bickerstaff? But I don't think that's necessarily fair to him because Evan Mobley took a lead, guys like that.
Yeah.
What's the Bickerstaff experience been like? What do you think he's done for this team? And then overall, like the importance of pride in the organization, because I think both of our teams are experiencing a lot of benefits from it.
I think that with Bickerstaff at the thing is that like, yeah, a lot of Cavs fans were mad about Bickerstaff, but a lot of Pistons fans are like, brother, the bar is incredibly low. We just had a coach of the we just had another former coach of the year
Yep.
come to the Pistons and be like, I got nothing. Like we had Dwayne Casey become a coach of the year, coach the Pistons, be like, oh, and then and then you had Monty Williams come in and be like, I got nothing. So at the same time, we were like, hey, if Bickerstaff, they were like Bickerstaff, like yeah, they got to the playoffs, but I mean he coached this team out of the playoffs. I'm like, and all I heard, I was like, you got you all the playoffs? That's what I heard, right? Now I'm like, okay, because
That's
I
real.
can't.
Yeah.
So I think that if the Bickerstaff thing like eventually all of those problems sound like good problems to have at this point. So it's one of those things where like Bickerstaff immediately came in and was like, yeah, we're gonna play Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham together a lot, but we're also gonna stagger them so one of them stays on the court at all times. And that was something where I'm like, we looked around and we're like, that was day one because Monty was a fan of the all bench lineups for some reason, and that you just having like the bar was so low, right? To where coming into the season, I was like, 30 games, I'm fine, right?
Yeah.
Seeing how ahead of schedule we are on that pace wise, and seeing just the amount of like players wanting to like play. I think that the players that bought in because so I like the experience. I like that Bickerstaff has clearly been like, even if before Jaden Ivey got hurt, he was like, Jaden Ivey, you're going to be an important part of this team, which is something that I don't think Ivey heard last year,
Right.
or it took like a lot of intervention for Ivy to like hear that, and that was really fun. But the thing is that JB Bickerstaff, it was important for him to raise our floor. That I'm not really concerned with the ceiling right now. The floor was the
Mm,
most important part for sure.
mm,
I wasn't thinking about 50 win seasons. I was thinking about 35 win seasons, and seeing what he was able to do with those Cavs teams, um, was something where I'm like, I can definitely see that happening. If we move on from him, if we move on from him later because we're not reaching expectations in the postseason, I'm gonna look back on those 4 years and be like, thank you for digging us out. But
right.
also, even if it goes above and beyond that and we do even better, it's one of those things where I'm like, this was the right choice, and I'm very happy with where we are at.
Yeah, I also didn't realize how long he was tenured in Cleveland. Like he started coaching them in 2020, and they pretty much improved every season under him. And I think, again, like you said, I mean, Monty Williams couldn't even figure out that they needed to share the court together. Jaden Ivey, I think he was third in minutes per game before he ended up getting hurt, and he was also playing really great basketball. You can see here that he was sharing about 60% of his minutes with Cade, so they spent about 20 minutes on the court together. And if you look at Latin the season prior, you could just see how different that was. Like, also look how many players have to scroll down for this
Yeah,
for the
it's just
20 roster.
it's all CBS list receipt.
Right, but you can see that they technically also. Oh wow, that's actually impressive. Apparently, they shared the same amount of minutes per game. Definitely didn't feel like that.
It never felt like that part.
And it was also super inconsistent. I remember that too, where it'd be like you'd have these random stretches where they were never on the floor together. And I think it's also like it's hard to figure out what I can trust when I speak to another former team about their coach because Utah Jazz fans were extremely jaded with Quinn Snyder, I think. And I think it's just coaches are always the biggest scapegoat because they're typically the ones that are held the most accountable. Like that's who fans typically tend to look to and be like, okay, they made this decision and that led to this, or they ended up not playing this guy, the rotations were bad, whatever it may be. And a lot of Jazz fans felt like Quinn he wasn't malleable enough with his rotations. Like he's going to stick with whatever he's going to stick to. And I've seen bits of that, sort of, I guess, like hard headedness or stubbornness to stick to the rotations, but he's also unlocked everything and he's maximized every player on this roster. Like DeAndre Hunter was not playing the type of basketball he is this season under any other coach. And that's not just the shot making, but it's the quick decision making. It's putting him in the best position to succeed. We've seen Jalen Johnson improve. We've seen Trae Young improve. All these guys becoming better under Quinn is not a coincidence. Like he's the best coach we've had in the Trae era. And so I think for a lot of fans, it's like it's easy to just point to your former coach as like the reason for all your problems because that helps you not sort of acknowledge the issues with your favorite players. Because people are always more tied to their favorite players than the other coach. It's easier to say that the coach was the problem. So I think that's definitely a lesson I've learned because that's what I thought about Bickerstaff.
I think it's easy for us Pistons fans to look at Monty, to look at Troy, to look at Tom. Like it's a combination of three. I understand that. But it was crazy last year whenever you would I forget how we acquired Mike Muscala, but Muscala played for us, and we got Muscala and Gallinari, and they played, and I was very happy. I was like, oh, we got a stretch five? That's cool. And then, so he would play some games or whatever. Then he would get some coach DMPs, and I'd be like, okay, that's kind of weird. And then he got waived, and I was like, I don't know, some weird's going on over here in terms of like certain players where it's like, yeah, this is what we need. We're like one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the league. And then, but on the other end, we acquired Evan Fournier via trade, and I was like, oh, a nice salary dump. And then I go to Pistons Lakers in crypto.com arena, and I see Evan Fournier play like 25 minutes. And I'm like, well, bro, it was one of those things where I'm like, what is actually going on here? Because I really can't explain like what's going on. So, but I'm glad we're out of that. I'm glad that the Pistons cleared house, like from just on multiple levels. It was a very necessary reset. So,
I'm also curious too, just about when it comes to like putting certain types of guys around your franchise, like on ball guard, because we're seeing like with the Pistons, of course, they made those moves to get Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., Tobias Harris. Those are more like pure shooters, pure floor spaces. But you still have Jaden Ivey, Ausar, Ron Holland, who they ended up like, doubling down on this season as more of these like athletic, versatile guys who don't offer that same amount of spacing. So I guess from your perspective, again, as a Trae Young fan, or even just like what you're seeing, what the Pistons are doing, you're not always going to be able to get athleticism, versatility, and shooting. Like you kind of have to a lot of times pick between those two. So, what do you see Cade operate best in? Is it with the athleticism next to him, or is it with the shooting? And then, I guess from like a Trae Young perspective, where do you think the Hawks need to focus in on? Is it more so like shoring up the shooting, or do they just keep waiting until the athleticism?
I'm always a pro like spacing kind of person. I've always been like that kind of thing. But I do understand the importance of having play. Like when I see Ausar Thompson in the corner, I'm like, okay, that's fine. And then he shot up like a pretty bad air ball today, from the corner. Asar air balls sometimes are in their own category because sometimes it's like they're not like the shot's not even close. I think that that's gonna definitely get worked on, hopefully. But I think that either I think they have a good combination now of these shooters where it's Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr., where like Tim Hardaway Jr., he's going to be streaky. Malik Beasley is going to be streaky. But I think that even if they're not, even if they're not hitting from three, you have guys on the court that are going to lock up on the other end. I love having that as a fallback. As much as I love having as much as I love those teams like the Pacers, where it's like we're the number one offensive team and like the 29th defense. I love those teams because it's just funny. But I do like having, it's not like a fail safe, but if it's like we play a game where it's like, hey, we're not scoring 120 points today. And that's like, okay, that's fine. Let's try to win the game on the other side of the court. And I know that the Pistons are not like the best on either end, but I think that just being able to be functional on either end. And the thing is that I think what's so special about Cade is able to make a lot of these lineups work, because he's been thrown almost every lineup combination in the book for over these 4 years. He's been thrown it. So I think he has a lot of experience of like dealing with certain types of players where even if Ausar Thompson is in the corner, Cade has the ability to make a great read it reminds me of when Russell Westbrook was in that Houston offense where he was like the worst shooter on the court, but James Harden was he was like a good cutter from the corner, and James Harden was able to find him for an alley-oop. So I think that even if Ausar Thompson is in the corner, I feel like when they don't pay attention to him, he's able to like be a good cutter. So I think that Cade having that combination and being used to all those types of players, would I love Ausar Thompson to get to 30%? I'm gonna say 30 from three, because that's like I want to make a real 30% from three. I would love that, but it's not at the point where I'm not one of those people where it's like, oh, this guy, like, get him off the court if he's not shooting over blank percentage, because it's like one of those things where it's like he's a world class defender. Ron Holland, even though Ron Holland was 0 for 5 today, fine. He's gonna bring the energy on the other side of the floor. So,
right.
I do want to, as someone, I like the Cade in space. I love that because I hadn't seen spacing for 3 years. But at the same time, it's one of those things where the Pistons getting Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. and Tobias Harris, just the change getting Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. has worked wonders. I'm not gonna include Tobias Harris in that because it's like I don't know. Tobias Harris sometimes, Tim Hardaway Jr. and Tobias Harris, they'll give you like one time, they'll be like, oh, they're 6 for 8, and then the next game is like, oh, they're 1 for 9, and you're like, oh, okay, well, but it's one of those things where when they got signed, I understood that was what came with the territory. I understood that, and but I like that they are a threat to make shots or take or make shots in terms of that. And I think that even just having that pressure to be like, they might have a night has been very good for Cade, because Cade had to start next to Killian Hayes for a little bit and start next to Isaiah Livers for a little bit. And the first half of last year, Alec Burks was horrendous. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, that was bad. So I think that it's just like good to see the Pistons do have a mix of lineups and mentalities that they can shift towards. So I think that mixed bag has been able to be very helpful this year.
And I think that's ultimately the hope for the Hawks too. Unfortunately for us, our two best shooters, Bogdanovich and Garrison Matthews, they just lost it over the last couple of games. And
Yeah.
then Reza Shea has been really streaky as a shooter, which he was overseas as well. But the hope is that these guys that you're playing who are super versatile eventually become capable of not just spacing the floor, but being like stronger offensive players. And that's why you give Ausar tons of reps, Ron more Bird.
Mm.
And I think for the Hawks in particular, like the it's actually kind of weird how similar we are in terms of like offensive and defensive efficiency. Like the Hawks are 17th in offense, 17th in defense. You guys are 18th in offense, 14th in defense. Over the last 2 weeks, the Hawks are 5th in defense and 24th in offense. You guys are 6th in defense and 22nd in offense. So I think you see these two guys who are great offensive engines. And for a long time, they've been able to lift their teams offensively. Like Trae Young has a longer track record, of course, but he's also had better supporting cast. Now they have similar supporting cast. You're seeing Cade able to sort of supersede those limitations from his lineups. You're seeing Trae somewhat being able to do that with him on the floor as well. And it's kind of like a lot of NBA teams, I feel like, have made that trade off where they're like, okay, we're going to lean more into defense. And the league wide offensive rating is also down this year. So it's at 113.8. Last season, it was at it's loading right now, but I'm pretty sure it was at like 115 or 116 or something like that. And I think it's 115.6. That's almost a 2 point difference. I
Yeah.
think it makes sense. Like a lot of teams are realizing, look, we can't just outscore everyone because the 3 point variance, like like every team in the NBA can make threes, and because the 3 point variance can shift so much from game to game, building a team strictly around offense is not going to get you super far if you actually have aspirations of building a contender or going deep in the playoffs. So I think a lot of teams are realizing that value. That's why the Hawks when they got Dyson Daniels. That's why they took Reza Shea. That's why you guys took Ron Holland when you already had an Ausar Thompson. It's
Yeah.
like let's get these guys who are super athletic, can impact games in multiple ways, and then let's see if they can figure it out offensively. And I think the NBA for a long time has put premiums on wings. And I'm going to be honest with you. I told you this when we were setting up the show. I don't know if there's a single player under 21 besides Wembanyama that I would want more than a Thompson twin. And I'm curious, do you agree with that sentiment? Because I was looking at the ages and I was like, okay, 22, that's Chet, that's Paolo, guys like that. I think I might be convinced into, but I'm still high on Thompson twins. I'm high on both of them. Almond has gotten a better, he's got a bigger role. We mentioned that he's been healthier, so he's been on the floor a bit more. But I think Ausar does everything, or most things that he can do. Like if not, I think he's a little bit better defensively too. But yeah, so how do you feel about the Thompson twins? What does it feel like to have one, and where do you think they rank in terms of young assets?
Well, obviously getting the fifth pick in the Wemby draft was backbreaking. That
Was that
was
the
like
third straight, right? The third
yeah,
straight fifth pick.
third straight fifth pick. Yeah, so that wasn't fun. And then getting the fifth pick with Ron Holland, it's been a weird streak of fifth picks. So no, I think that might either second or third or fourth. I forget. But I think seeing and I had concerns about the Thompson twins because,
Mm.
I'm not the best like draft person, but I was very concerned because it was about how OTE marketed themselves as a league.
Yeah,
I was like,
very
I
unserious.
I was like, "What is this about?" Like, I like in OTE, I feel like it was very hard to, like, watch full games with them or something. It felt really I was like, "Where do I watch this?" But that might be just me, like, not really trying to put as much effort into that. But, yeah, I was really concerned because I was like, "Okay, I don't know what level of basketball OTE actually is." So
Hmm.
but seeing them be, like, as good as they are athletically, and of course, I think Amen, in OTE was like he handled the ball a lot more, and they're both like playing what like their roles were in OTE, but a little bit more. But having Asar be that kind of a Swiss Army knife, someone that's really excited to defend and able to like use all his physical tools to be able to defend whoever, I'll take it. I will 1,000% take it, and we can definitely work with the tools and the God given ability. And, even though the corner three pointer isn't there, like you see a SAR, sometimes he'll take like a nice little midi. He had a midi today that like didn't count. And I was like, I like that. I like how they would hang in the air and hit that shot. So it's one of those things where the potential still has. It's not like oh, this is the finished product of Ausar, or oh, there's not much left. But I pray to God that Fred Vincent is able to help with that jump shot, because getting the shot doctor from the Pelicans, I think, was um really, I was like fairly
Yeah, I
intrigued
was
by
hyped
that.
about that. Yeah,
I was like, oh,
he's worked miracles. He's definitely worked miracles. Brett Ingram is a great case. Lonzo Ball, um, Dyson not improving on him actually scares me, and I
hmm,
do wonder, yeah, if at some point it's just too large of a sample size for him to be any better than what he is right now. And I'm not gonna give up on him. He's just 21, and he has such great touch in every other area. But when you're that bad for the free throw line and you have 3 seasons where you're below 33%, it's not a great track record, right? So
yeah. But
I haven't
I
given
think
up
that
on him.
the but I think that the main thing, again, we lean back on is definitely Trae Young. You have what I think is the best passer in the league. Being able to find you
Speak
to
on it.
find
Yeah.
he's able, like, I think that when you have a passer as good as Trae Young is, you're gonna get a very healthy you're gonna get some very healthy, like, shots in your pocket or whatever. Um, and so that's why I think with these, I mean, Cade just has to get the ball to Malik Beasley, and Malik Beasley will figure it out. Like, he's like, though sometimes his shot selection, I'm like, yeah, no one on the team last year is gonna take that. But he has the confidence in, like, taking it and making it, and, it's like, doesn't really matter. Um, whether I and then whether some shooters on the Hawks, they might need to have the ball in their shot pocket or have it in rhythm or have to, like, learn on
Mhm.
whatever. I think that Trey is definitely one of the best at being able to do that. So I feel like if there's any situation where they are gonna be able to get more comfortable with these kind of shots, I feel like having Trey on the team is just the best thing possible.
Yeah, we were eighth in shot quality last year. This year we're first. To your point, fully learning and leading into the Trey offense. Um, I want to say I definitely really appreciate you, bro. I want you to let the people know where they can find you. If you don't recognize his voice, this is the Kofie from Secret List. I've always enjoyed his content, but if people may not be familiar, let them know where to find.
For sure, for sure. You can follow me on, I'm gonna say you could subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Kofie, Kofie. I usually talk about sports or sports video games. I kind of lean into either. You can follow the Secret Base YouTube channel, and then you can follow me on TikTok or at Kofie Y, KOFIEWHY, Twitter, Kofie, KOFIE, and then Instagram is Kofie Yeboah, KOFIE. Yeboah. So yeah,
And
thanks
I'll
for having
definitely
me.
make sure to link all that. Of course, man. I definitely appreciate you. Y'all make sure to follow him on all platforms. If you enjoyed the podcast, please make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.